have a desire to serve others. Greenleaf was reacting to the turbulent times of the late 1960s and early 1970s, in which he felt was a deterioration in leadership in the United States. Greenleaf constructed 10 characteristics that made up a servant leader. These characteristics we'll explore through the stories and the historical context of integration and the dynamic relationship between Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson. What it took these men to stamp out segregation in Major League Baseball could only be accomplished through deep moral commitments and the need to serve others through great servant leadership. Branch Rickey didn't integrate baseball on his own. He, like all great leaders, collaborated with others because he knew the importance of listening to a diverse audience of people who could help his cause. He worked closely with the African American community leaders in and out of Brooklyn, ministers, sociologists, and others like Dr. Robert M. Haig of Columbia University and Dr. Jose Seda of the University of Puerto Rico. These two scholars did research for Rickey on culture and the capabilities of people of color in Mexico and Cuba. Both countries played baseball, and many African American players played side by side with players of all races. Rickey's quest to integrate baseball began as early as 1943 when he came to the Brooklyn Dodgers. He had a fundamental belief that it was wrong to exclude people of color in baseball and other aspects of society. Rickey was more than just a baseball executive. He was a highly educated lawyer, a former college player and coach of both football and baseball, and a professional baseball player. One key experience in Rickey's life took place in 1903 while he was attending college and coaching for Ohio Wesleyan University. While on a road trip to South Bend, Indiana, the team, which included a player, Charles Tommy Thomas, a person of color, had reservations at the Hotel Oliver. When the team tried to check into the hotel, the clerk told Rickey that only whites were permitted at the Hotel Oliver. Rickey was extremely upset at this injustice, especially when Thomas told Rickey, "Maybe I should go home." Rickey said, no, we'll be all right. Rickey was then able to convince the hotel clerk to allow Thomas to sleep on a cot in his room. Charles Thomas sat on a cot in his room crying, pulling one hand with the other and saying, "God, Mr. Rickey, if only I could change the color of my skin." Later, reflecting on this experience, to Arthur Mann, Later reflecting on this experience with Arthur Mann in a Life magazine article in 1957, Rickey admitted, "I never felt so helpless in my life." Rickey himself cited this 1903 experience many times as a key factor in his determination to break baseball's color ban and sign Jackie Robinson and other black players. Acceptance and empathy. As a young college student, Rickey traveled around Ohio giving dry speeches in support of prohibition. In one such trip, he came to a town where all the hotel owners refused him lodging because of these speeches. This humiliation taught him a valuable lesson and could be one reason he could relate and emphasize with Charles Thomas. Branch Rickey came from humble beginnings and worked his way through college. He often felt himself an outsider because he did not have nice clothes or even a high school education like his other classmates. The same could be said about Jackie Robinson. Both men started from humble beginnings and grew into servant leaders. Branch Rickey thought it was wrong to deny equal rights to people of color in this country, and this angered many white owners in baseball. Not caring what those owners thought, he vowed he would challenge Jim Crow when he could. After he left the St. Louis Cardinals and went to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1943, he orchestrated a meeting at the New York Athletic Club with the owners of the Dodgers. He talked about his long-term goals. At this time, World War II was in full swing. America was fighting a bitter war to end racism in Europe, while Jim Crow laws were still prevalent in the American South. All able-bodied men were in the military, leaving a shortage of ball players. It was Ricky's idea to have scouts look at 15 and 16-year-old boys to sign. Then Ricky went one step further, stating that if the mass scouting might possibly come up with a Negro player or two, he wouldn't object to that. George Laughlin, one of the owners of the Dodgers, interjected, "If you could come up with a man who's better than all the others, use him." The other Brooklyn club owners didn't know that Laughlin and Ricky had this whole conversation already planned out. Ricky said, "A Negro player or two will not only help the Brooklyn Dodger organization, but put colored players in the major leagues. It will also accomplish something that's long overdue. It is something I have thought about and believed in for a long time." Ricky not only wanted to heal baseball, but the country. Exhibiting the character of a true servant leader, he once said, "I don't like silent men when personal liberty is at stake." Awareness and perception. In 1900, at the age of 18 years of age, Branch Rickey left home to attend college at Ohio Wesleyan University. Ricky arrived with only the suit he wore and his baseball uniform in a bag. He was so poor that he went through his freshman year with only one pair of pants. Ricky worked, played sports, and threw himself into other school activities. However, Ricky was fully aware that he didn't fit in with the other students who were prep school graduates. He was out of his league, but that didn't stop him. He finished college and graduated in 3 years. Because Branch Rickey grew up even poorer than Jackie Robinson, he understood what it felt like not to fit in and how others perceived him. This helped shape Branch Rickey into a servant leader. He truly understood how it felt to be less fortunate. Ricky, like Jackie Robinson, started life on the outside looking in. Robinson once told a reporter, "Anybody who says I can't make it doesn't know what I've gone through and what I'm prepared to go through to stay up in the major leagues." In the late 1940s through 1957, Jackie Robinson was the hero to everyone who grew up in Brooklyn. Black or white, boys or girls, Jackie was their guy. I met one of these kids, Donald A. Stratton, in Blanco, Illinois. He was 9 years old in 1947 and loved his Dodgers. Doris Curtin Goodwin also said that Jackie Robinson was her hero. She states that it was not until much later that she truly understood the significance of what Robinson achieved in 1947 as the pioneer of the civil rights movement. She points out that after Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball, nothing was ever the same in sports or in the country. Jackie Robinson took his place in history as one of the first civil rights leaders who promoted nonviolence. Instead of violence, Robinson used sportsmanship. He took his responsibilities seriously. He was fully aware that he was making history for his people, and he would not let them down. Jackie Robinson was a servant leader before he ever put on a Brooklyn Dodger uniform. Ricky chose Robinson for his character and convictions. Persuasion. To break the color barrier, Branch Rickey needed to find just the right man who would withstand the pressures of being the first African American to play in the modern era. Rickey needed to convince the country that this was the right thing to do for everyone in America, which is why he went to both business and religious leaders in the African American community for their support before he would announce that he signed Jackie Robinson. Rickey asked the African American community leaders to encourage their people to come to the ballpark dressed in their best clothes and be on their best behavior. He stressed that if someone would make any racist remarks in the stands, they should just let it go. Ricky emphasized for the greater good, everyone needed to be behind Robinson. Ricky stressed that it was important not to create any problems off the field in order that Robinson succeed on the field. The African American community listened. Building community. Jackie Robinson's first game as a Dodger was on April 15, 1947 in Evansville, New York. It was in front of a record crowd of 26,623. Everyone came to see the player to break the color barrier. During an early season game at Evansville, Robinson experienced some harsh racial abuse from the Phillies manager Ben Chapman. Chapman and others poured out a string of unconscionable racist abuse which helped unify 29 men on the Dodgers behind Robinson. Not one Dodger was willing to witness someone kick a man who had his hands tied behind his back. Unknowingly, Chapman created sympathy on Robinson's behalf. Sympathy may be the most unifying word in the world. Its Greek origins means to suffer. To say I sympathize with you means to say I suffer with you. Chapman caused men like Eddie Stanky to stick up for Robinson in the face of verbal abuse and made Robinson a real member of the Dodger team. Stanky and other Dodgers suffered along with Robinson. Another key team-building event happened when Pee Wee Reese, the Kentucky-born Dodger captain, placed his arm around the shoulder of Robinson early in the 1947 season during a game with the Cincinnati Reds. This gesture of friendship has been interpreted as a symbol of Jackie's acceptance. Reese and Robinson were great friends on and off the field. Reese once said, "I put myself in Jackie's shoes. I think of what it must have been like for him. I think of myself trying to make it an all-black league. I know I couldn't do it." Conceptualization. Branch Rickey was a dreamer. His biographer, Arthur Mann, described him as a visionary with pioneering ideas, a family man with high regards for the truth, and a stubborn person who refused compromise. Rickey created the modern-day minor league farm system when he was the business manager of the St. Louis Browns and the president of the St. Louis Cardinals. He created this six-step plan for integration of baseball. The first 5 steps I've already discussed. In January 1943, Rickey set his plan in motion. The 6th step was the key to the success of Rickey's plan. He needed to have the Dodger organization accept an African American player. Rickey prepared the Dodger organization by first speaking with the manager of the Montreal Royals, Clay Hopper. Montreal, Canada is where Rickey began the integration process. The Royals were a minor league affiliate of the Dodgers, and Montreal was a more open-minded people for people of color. Rickey wanted the first African American player to integrate baseball in a city that would accept him. The International League played mostly in major North American cities. This was the initial step before Rickey would potentially bring an African American to Brooklyn. Rickey had other concerns too. He sought advice to figure out what to do with many issues, such as spring training, which would have to be moved out of Jim Crow, Florida to Cuba. Rickey was concerned about team dynamics. He tried to prepare for everything and anything by researching every aspect of Robinson's life. When Clyde Seaforth, the chief scout of the Dodgers, found Robinson, he was playing for the Kansas City Monarchs of the Negro League. Seaforth told Robinson that Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers was scouting him for a new Negro League. Rickey wanted Robinson for the new Brown Dodgers. This was the cover story that Branch Rickey devised to mask the true reasons his scouts were looking and talking to African American players. Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey had their first meeting on August 28, 1945 in Rickey's office in Brooklyn, New York. Rickey knew based on the scouting reports that Robinson could run, throw, and hit for power. The true test of Robinson was not his skill as a ball player, but more importantly, his character, personality, background, intelligence, and a desire to succeed. Unlike most of the Negro League players of his day, Jackie Robinson was college educated. He went to Pasadena City College and was later a four-letterman at UCLA. Robinson was lieutenant in the U.S. Army. He was a morale officer at Fort Riley. Robinson phoned in Provost Marshal Major Hefner to voice his complaint about segregation at the PX. Robinson was told nothing could be done, and then Hefner said, "Let me put you this way, how would you like your wife to sit next to a nigger?" Robinson was extremely upset, and only then did Major Hefner realize that Lieutenant Robinson was a person of color. Robinson was transferred shortly after that incident. Robinson was a servant leader long before he met Branch Rickey. Second Lieutenant Robinson refused to give up a seat and go to the back of a military bus. Robinson stood up for others and himself, and this eventually led to his court-martial and honorary discharge. Branch Rickey already knew these things about Robinson, but needed to hear it for himself. Rickey was a family man and knew the importance of having someone to come home to for support, and encouraged all of his players to get married. If Robinson was going to be the first African American to play in the modern era, he would need the support of a good woman. So the first question Branch Rickey asked him, "Do you have a girl?" Robinson was thrown by this question. After he signed his contract, he went home and proposed to his girlfriend Rachel. On February 10, 1946, they were married. Rickey told Robinson that he could not react to any physical or verbal abuse, and he had to be strong enough to turn the other cheek. Robinson told him he had another cheek. Even though Rickey signed Robinson on that first meeting, it was not until October 23rd of 1945 that it was announced. Rickey wanted to prepare the community of Brooklyn and Major League Baseball. He was a true visionary with a great servant leader because he always thought of the big picture as well as individuals. Foresight. Rickey admired President Abraham Lincoln. He had a photograph of him on his office wall. He knew that segregation was wrong in and out of baseball. He also knew that he needed to expand the pool of available talent during World War II, and that there was great talent in the Negro Leagues. And was one of the first things Jackie Robinson noticed when he walked into Rickey's office that first time. Television has been noted as the key factor in the success of Jackie Robinson. According to Dr. George N. Gordon, prizefighter Jack Johnson was edited by photographs, Joe Louis was filtered by radio, but the unblink of an eye humanized Robinson. He was not a stereotype. He was an equal with all the other players on the field. It was a lesson taught by example, similar to Ed Sullivan kissing Pearl Bailey on television. You couldn't deny his blackness. It was a visible, sustaining show day after day. Television magnified the social event and made it reflective and directive. Rickey knew he needed the team owner's approval to bring Robinson up to Brooklyn, but he wanted to make sure he had the commissioner's approval first. So he had a private meeting with Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Happy Chandler, a native Kentuckian. Chandler could overrule the team owners if they voted against integration. The conversation between Rickey and Chandler went like this. Rickey said, "I cannot go ahead in the face of that vote. I cannot do it unless I'm assured of your support." Chandler asked, "Can this man play?" Rickey said, "He could make the major leagues today." Chandler then said, "The only reason he's being kept out is because he's black." Chandler continued, "Let's bring him in like just any other player, and I'll keep an eye on him." This is all that it took for Happy Chandler to push the owners aside after they voted 15-1 against integration in the summer of 1946. Chandler let Branch Rickey bring up Jackie Robinson to the Dodgers on April 15, 1947. This was the beginning of the integration of baseball. Stewardship. Branch Rickey looked after all of his players from his early days as a college baseball and football coach to his retirement in baseball in 1955. He was concerned for the welfare of all the players and their families. For instance, in 1948, Roy Campanella was sent down to the minors for a short time to play for the St. Paul Saints. While his wife Ruth just gave birth, only 3 days later was Roy called back to Brooklyn. He expressed to his manager, Walter Alston, that he wasn't sure that his wife could travel and that he didn't want to leave her behind. Alston told Campanella he would talk to Mr. Rickey. Rickey advised Campanella to consult his doctor about moving his wife and baby. Everything worked out, and the doctor told Campanella that they were in no danger to travel, and so off to Brooklyn they went. Commitment to growth of people. In Branch Rickey's mind, the integration of baseball was not only the right thing to do, it was long overdue. In 1883, 2 persons of color played baseball on all-white teams in the Northern League. John Bud Fowler, a pitcher-catcher and outfielder for Stillwater, Minnesota, and Moses Fleetwood Walker, a catcher for Toledo, Ohio. The following year, Toledo was absorbed into the American Association, which is part of today's major leagues. In 1884, Moses Fleetwood Walker played 42 games alongside his brother. Moses is considered the last African American to play Major League Baseball until Jackie Robinson. Hall of Famer Cap Anson of the Chicago White Stockings was an outspoken player-manager and racist who refused to let his team take the field if there was any people of color on the opposing team. There were 2 different incidences that Anson protested and refused to let his team take the field. On August 10, 1883, while Chicago White Stockings were playing Toledo in an exhibit game, the Walker brothers were scheduled to play, and on July 16, 1887, when Moses was playing for Newark alongside George Stoley, another African-American player who was scheduled to be the starting pitcher. Anson successfully stopped the men of color from playing partially because of a widely read and decisively racist article published in the Sporting News 3 days before the July 16th game. According to James A. Riley, that same day the International League directors met in secret and decided not to approve any other people of color to play in the future. The man responsible for banning blacks from playing in the International League was Cap Anson. The American Association and the National League soon followed suit, and by 1897, blacks were excluded from playing in all major and minor league teams. Though never formally a rule, the color line persisted in baseball for the next 50 years. Thus, it became an unwritten rule or the gentleman's agreement that no Negro player may play baseball on the professional level. Not another person of color played Major League Baseball until Jackie Robinson in 1947. However, one player bent the color line in 1916, Jimmy Claxton, a man of both African American and Native American heritage. Claxton played 1 game for the Oakland Oaks of the Pacific Coast League, but as soon as his true heritage was discovered, he was fired. It took another 30 years and 2 true servant leaders like Rickey and Robinson to break the color line officially and eliminating it forever. Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson shared the monumental task of stamping out segregation in professional baseball, a move that is often noted as the start of the civil rights movement. Jackie Robinson became very outspoken and very active in the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King said that he was inspired by Jackie Robinson. King stated, "Jackie Robinson made it possible for me in the first place. Without him, I would never have been able to do what I did. There could not be two finer examples of servant leadership than Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson. Now, thank you. I don't know how many of you had read Rickey and Robinson by Roger Kahn, but I'm halfway through the book, and I found something that I did not find in any other baseball book that I've read on the subject. What was interesting, on March 12, 1945, Governor Dewey of New York signed the Fair Employment Practice Act. And this act basically was an act that included, you couldn't discriminate against religion or race. So by law, Rickey had the law behind him. He was a lawyer, he knew this. And March 12, 1945 was before Rickey started his full-run plan. And I thought that was very interesting. Of course, this particular law became federal, and of course it included sex. You couldn't discriminate. Any questions? Yes?
I read in Satchel Paige's biography that he felt that he should have been the first one to be put into baseball. He was a different personality than Jackie Robinson, and seriously, he was willing, he said, to take a cut in pay to play with the white players.
Jackie Robinson, we could all agree, was not the best Negro League player, but he had something that most of the other players didn't have. He was college educated, he was an officer in the Army, and he knew how to handle himself. And that, as he just said, that's some of the characteristics he was saying that they should be scouting for. That is what Rickey was looking for. He was not looking for the best player. He was looking for the best man who had the best character and who could handle the situation. If he would have fought back any of the verbal or physical abuse that he experienced, it would have failed. And he knew it. Rickey knew it. And so that's why Robinson was picked. But they went to Campanella first, and Rickey didn't care for Campanella.
Why didn't he care for Campanella?
He didn't have the type of personality and discipline. Yes?
Didn't he have some doubts about how old Campanella really was, too? Because Campy had been already playing for at least a decade. Because he had been like 15 years old. But there were age issues with Satchel. There were potentially age issues with Campanella. At least with Jackie, he knew he had somebody who'd be able to last for more than a year or two.
Well, I think more importantly, it was the character of the man. Satchel Paige did not have the character he needed, and he didn't think Campanella had the disposition to handle it either. It was the high pressure that the first African American to break the color barrier was going to withstand. That's also why he asked Jackie if he had a girl. He needed someone to come, like it said, someone to come home to support him. Yes.
Couldn't that be said that he just needed to look a certain way for all the white fans to accept him? Like, you have a family, you have to act a certain way, and then
I think
accept it.
it was more that he was going to, well, Robinson had a temper, and Rickey knew it, but he also knew that he was able to, push came to shove, he would control his temper. That's what he really needed to guarantee at that first meeting, that he would control his temper. If he could control that temper, then he could withstand the pressure. That's what it was all about. It wasn't the best player, it was the best person
To make him look good to white folks.
He was the black, he was very dark skinned.
Right.
He stuck out. It had nothing to do, it had to do with how he was going to handle himself and how he would withstand everything that was going to be thrown at him. And that is why Robinson was the one who was picked. Yes.
I'm assuming you saw the movie 42?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, what's your take on the portrayals of Robinson and Ricky in the movie?
I mean, I enjoyed the movie, and with all the movies, there's an element that is a little off the whole truth because it's Hollywood, but I thought it was good. It just, I haven't seen it recently so that I could tell you what I thought wasn't just right. I mean, I've gone to plays about the Robinson-Ricky story. I've seen all the movies. I own all the movies. I read as many books as possible, from starting with, the ones that, came out, in the 50s, late 40s, when even Jackie Robinson wrote something. I think there's always that element of entertainment. But, Branch Rickey was cheap. Everyone knew it. And he needed to find talent. He did not pay the Negro Leagues owners for their talent. He didn't think he had to. He thought that they were kind of shady. This is what I'm reading in Roger Kahn's book. These are Roger Kahn's words. And that he felt he shouldn't pay for them. My interpretation was, hey, he was cheap and he thought he could get away with it, so he didn't pay them. Other teams, when they were taking away players from the Negro League, some of them did get some financial compensation. But some of the players weren't even under contract for the teams that they were playing. So, we have less African American players today than ever before, and they're looking into it. Well, it's easier. I blame Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was the one. Anyone can put a hoop up or shoot hoops, and you can do that with yourself. You don't even need other people to practice basketball. But you need a lot of people and a lot of land. Now, the White Sox, I think, are doing a better job than the Cubs, but the Cubs also invested in Little League. I'll tell you, the best thing for baseball was this last year's World Series. That got the major leagues even more committed, especially in the city of Chicago, when our teams were so bad that rooting for those Little Leaguers was the best baseball last summer. So, but, I don't think there's enough being done to get kids excited. And personally, MLB is killing baseball for me. I can't afford to go to the games and sit where I want to sit. Now I do, because I buy the cheap seats and I have an usher that takes care of me in 2 different ballparks, one in Milwaukee and one in Chicago. But it's ridiculous, like you said. You take a family of 4. You can't. Most people can't do it. I'd rather see a live theatrical performance and spend more money on that, but I'm also a Saint, which is an usher corps in Chicago, so I go to the theater free. But I watch it on television. Now, last season, I don't have cable. That's a conscious choice. When I was in grad school, most recently, we cut out the dish or the cable, so I only see a limited amount of games. Well, I'm a diehard Cub fan. That was a blessing this past summer that I only was able to see a limited amount of games. But Major League Baseball is killing it. They're killing themselves with their costs, and the players are multi-billionaires over pampered babies. And I'll pitch down, let me just say one thing. Bob Feller, who I met only at a card show because I'm not old enough to see him pitch, but he pitched 9 innings. Plus, he pitched hay all winter. He worked on a farm. These guys aren't in condition. They lift weights, but they're not physically fit to endure a full game, or maybe their financial managers don't want them to. Which one?
I can't remember this was very, very good. I don't know, because he covered 2/3 of the book was Jackie, but really the whole race and Church United wrote that very, very good.
I'm not sure. I may have it, but I may not have read it yet.
Something like Phil Cavaletta, Spike Joe, tried
Oh, appreciate it. Now,
Can you believe it?
if anybody's interested in reading the entire paper, I can give you a business card, or you can write the URL of my website. It's on my homepage. This paper was written when I was in graduate school at Dominican University for my leadership class. And I was in library science school because I'm an archivist at Preserved History, and I was trying to find a way to do one of my big 25-page papers on baseball, and this was the way I was able to do it. It was kind of hard, but this was the best class to actually incorporate baseball. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.